Ethan Coulter felt his future crumble as Vernon Blackwood leveled the rifle at his chest. The ranch owner's face twisted with rage at his defiance to save a wounded mare that wasn't worth the bullet to put her down. Standing his ground despite the threat, Ethan couldn't possibly know that this single act of compassion would thrust him into a desperate battle for water rights, survival, and ultimately a chance at something he'd never dared hope for, a place to truly belong. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The sun hung low over Redemption Valley Ranch, casting long shadows across the dusty grounds as Ethan Coulter led the limping mare back toward the stables. Sweat dampened his shirt, clinging to his broad shoulders as he murmured soft reassurances to the injured animal. The Palomino, a prized breeding horse worth more than most men made in 5 years, trembled beneath his steady hand. Her leg was badly swollen where the barbed wire had cut deep, but Ethan knew she could be saved if treated properly. "Easy, Sundance," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the evening wind that swept across the Montana plains. "Few more steps is all." The ranch house door slammed open as Vernon Blackwood, the ranch owner, strode out with purpose, his weathered face twisted into a scowl that had made grown men cower. Behind him, his son Lyle followed with an eager malice that made Ethan's jaw tighten. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Coulter?" Vernon's voice boomed across the yard, sending a nearby flock of chickens scattering. Ethan straightened to his full height, still keeping a steadying hand on the mare's neck. "Found her caught in the north pasture fence. Wire cut her bad, but she'll heal if we—" "I gave orders about that horse," Vernon cut him off, closing the distance between them with heavy strides. "She was to be put down if found injured. Too much trouble, that one. Always breaking fences, causing more damage than she's worth." Lyle circled around, eyeing the mare with cold calculation. "Pa's right. Should have put a bullet in her head where you found her. Now we gotta waste medicine and time on a troublemaker." Ethan felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, the same burning that had gotten him fired from 3 ranches before this one. 8 months at Redemption Valley had been his longest stretch in years. He'd kept his head down, done the work, earned respect from the other hands, but some things a man couldn't abide. "She's your best breeding mare, Mr. Blackwood. Foals fetch top dollar. Wouldn't make sense to put her down for something that can be fixed." Vernon's eyes narrowed to slits. "You questioning my judgment, boy?" The word boy hung in the air between them. At 32, Ethan was hardly a boy, but Vernon used the word like a whip, meant to cut and diminish. "No, sir. Just saying she's valuable. Worth saving." He kept his voice level, though every instinct told him to lead the horse away, to protect her from the man who viewed animals as nothing but assets on a ledger. Vernon stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could smell the whiskey on his breath. "When I give an order on my ranch, I expect it to be followed, not interpreted, not questioned, followed." The other ranch hands had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Ethan saw Miguel, the oldest among them, shake his head slightly in warning. The message was clear. Back down, apologize, live to fight another day. It was the sensible thing to do, but Ethan Coulter had never been accused of being sensible where animals were concerned. "I'll treat her myself," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Won't cost you anything. She'll be back to breeding condition by spring." Lyle snorted. "Listen to the horse whisperer. Think you know better than everyone, don't you, Coulter?" Vernon's face darkened to a dangerous shade of crimson. "You've been trouble since you got here. Too many opinions, too soft-hearted for ranch work." He turned to his son. "Get Doc Wilson's rifle from the house." A hush fell over the gathered hands. Miguel crossed himself quietly. Young Jimmy Jenkins, barely 17 and new to ranch life, looked between Ethan and Vernon with wide, frightened eyes. "Mr. Blackwood," Ethan said, fighting to keep his voice steady, This horse is worth 5,000 at least. Killing her is throwing away good money." "It's my money to throw away," Vernon replied coldly, "and I've made up my mind." Lyle returned with the rifle, a gleaming Winchester that Vernon kept oiled and ready. He handed it to his father with a smirk that made Ethan's blood boil. In that moment, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. With deliberate movements, he untied his own horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Rebel, from the hitching post and quickly transferred his saddle to the injured mare. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Vernon demanded, raising the rifle. "I quit," Ethan said simply, leading both horses toward the gate. "I'm taking Sundance with me." Vernon leveled the rifle at Ethan's chest. "That's my horse, Coulter. You take her, it's theft." Ethan didn't slow his stride. "Then I'm buying her. Take it out of the wages you owe me." "You're a fool," Vernon spat. "That won't cover half her value, even injured. Then I'll send the rest when I have it." Ethan paused at the gate, looking back at the assembled men. Some avoided his eyes. Others, like Miguel, gave him the slightest nod of respect. Vernon's finger caressed the trigger. "I ought to shoot you where you stand." "You could," Ethan agreed, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "But unlike some, I've got friends in the county who'd ask questions." The standoff stretched for what seemed like eternity, tension thick as August humidity. Finally, Vernon lowered the rifle slightly. "Take the damn horse and get off my land. But hear this, you're finished in this valley. I'll make sure no ranch from here to Billings will hire you. And if you can't pay what you owe for that horse within the month, I'll have the sheriff on you for theft." Ethan nodded once, mounted Rebel, and led the injured Sundance through the gate. As he rode away from Redemption Valley Ranch, the weight of his decision pressed down on him like a physical thing. No job, almost no money, and now responsible for an injured horse worth more than he could hope to pay. Night was falling fast as he made his way toward the foothills where his friend Jacob Whitecloud lived. The Blackfoot man kept to himself mostly, but he and Ethan had formed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and a shared love of horses. Jacob would give him shelter for the night, help him treat Sundance's injuries. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles. Tonight he had saved a life that deserved saving. Whatever came next, Ethan could face it knowing he'd done right by the horse, even if doing right had cost him everything else. The stars emerged one by one above the vast Montana sky as Ethan rode on, the injured mare limping beside him, both of them outcasts now, their fates intertwined by a single act of defiance against cruelty, disguised as practicality. Jacob Whitecloud's cabin came into view just as full darkness descended on the Montana wilderness. Nestled against the pines at the base of the foothills, the small structure emitted a warm glow from its windows that guided Ethan through the final stretch of his journey. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, carrying the scent of burning cedar into the night air. Before Ethan could call out, the cabin door opened, and Jacob's silhouette appeared against the light. "Thought I heard horses," the Blackfoot man said, stepping onto the porch. His eyes, sharp despite his 60 years, immediately assessed the situation, Ethan arriving after dark with a limping mare in tow. "Trouble follows you like a shadow, my friend." Ethan managed a tired smile. "This time I walked straight into it, eyes wide open." Jacob moved forward to examine Sundance's leg, his weathered hands gentle as they probed the swollen flesh around the wound. "Barbed wire?" "Yes. Found her tangled up in the north pasture fence at Blackwood's place." "And Blackwood wanted her put down." It wasn't a question. He did. Ethan dismounted stiffly, his muscles protesting after the tense ride. "I disagreed." Jacob grunted, leading both horses toward his small stable. "So you stole her?" "Bought her with wages owed," Ethan corrected, following, "though Blackwood says it's not nearly enough." Inside the stable, warm and fragrant with fresh hay, Jacob worked quickly to clean Sundance's wound. The mare flinched but stood steady under his expert hands. "She's a good one," Jacob commented, applying a poultice of herbs he'd gathered from his stores. Strong spirit, will to live. Worth saving, Ethan said, the words carrying all his justification. Jacob wrapped the leg with strips of clean cloth, his movements practiced and precise. What will you do now? Blackwood won't let this pass without consequences. Ethan leaned against the stable wall, suddenly feeling the full weight of his impulsive decision. Honestly, I didn't think that far ahead. Got no job, little money, and now a horse I can't afford. He ran a hand through his dust-streaked hair. Blackwoods threatened to blacklist me with every rancher in the valley. He'll do it too, Jacob said, straightening up. Man holds grudges like a miser holds gold. They settled the horses for the night before heading to the cabin. Inside, Jacob's home was simple but comfortable. A single room with a fireplace, table, chairs, and a narrow bed. Books lined crude shelves along one wall, a surprise to most who met the solitary man, but not to Ethan, who knew his friend's curious mind. Jacob ladled stew from a pot hanging over the fire into 2 wooden bowls. The rich aroma of venison and wild herbs filled the small space. You could head north, Jacob suggested as they ate. Montana's big country. Blackwood's reach has limits. Ethan shook his head. Running's never sat right with me. Besides, I promised to pay for the horse. Honor is expensive, Jacob observed, breaking a piece of cornbread. Could sell her once she's healed. No. The word came quickly, surprising even Ethan with its force. She deserves better than being passed around like unwanted goods. Jacob studied him over the rim of his coffee cup. Then you'll need money. Fast. The horse auction in Silvertown is next week, Ethan said, an idea forming. Good riders can make decent pay breaking horses for sale. Breaking wild mustangs in a week? Jacob raised an eyebrow. That's dangerous work, even for someone with your skills. Got any better ideas? Jacob was silent for a long moment, then set his cup down decisively. Actually, I do. Catherine Reed over at Whispering Pines Ranch lost her foreman last month. Took a fall during roundup that broke his back. She's been looking for someone with experience. Ethan frowned. Whispering Pines. That's prime cattle country. Must be 20-30 hands working there. She'd never hire me without references. She might, Jacob said, if someone she trusts recommends you. And who would that be? A small smile crossed Jacob's weathered face. I've been supplying her with horses for 15 years, good horses, never sold her an animal that wasn't worth twice what she paid. Hope flickered briefly in Ethan's chest before reality doused it. Blackwood will get to her before I can. Warn her off. Perhaps. Jacob rose and moved to a small desk in the corner, pulling out paper and a pencil. Or perhaps she'll make up her own mind once she meets you. Catherine Reed isn't easily intimidated, not even by Vernon Blackwood. As Jacob wrote his letter of introduction, Ethan stepped outside onto the small porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast Montana sky like diamond dust. In the distance, a wolf howled, the sound echoing through the silent landscape. Ethan thought about the path that had led him here, years of drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying long, always moving on when his principles collided with the harsh realities of the cattle business. He'd developed a reputation as a skilled horseman but a difficult employee, too quick to challenge owners when he felt animals were being mistreated. It was no way for a man to build a life, he knew that. But he couldn't seem to change, couldn't look away when he saw suffering he could prevent. The door opened behind him and Jacob joined him, letter in hand. Whispering Pines is a day's ride southeast, he said, handing Ethan the folded paper. Catherine's fair but demanding. Do right by her and she'll do right by you. And Sundance? Leave her here to heal. I'll look after her. Ethan nodded, grateful beyond words. I'll pay you back. Yes, you will, Jacob agreed easily, by proving me right about you to Catherine Reed. That night, Ethan slept on Jacob's floor beside the dying fire, his saddle as a pillow. His dreams were troubled, Vernon Blackwood's threats mingling with images of injured horses and unfamiliar faces. He woke before dawn, his decision made. He would ride to Whispering Pines Ranch and face whatever reception awaited him there. If Catherine Reed turned him away, he'd find another path forward. But he would not run, and he would not abandon the horse he'd risked everything to save. As first light broke over the mountains, Ethan saddled Rebel, secured his few possessions, and tucked Jacob's letter safely inside his jacket. "Remember," Jacob said as Ethan prepared to leave, "Catherine values honesty above all else. Tell her the truth from the start." Ethan nodded, mounted his horse, and pointed him southeast toward Whispering Pines Ranch, and whatever future awaited them both. Whispering Pines Ranch announced itself with a towering wooden archway spanning the road, the ranch name burned into the crossbeam in elegant script. As Ethan guided Rebel beneath it, he took in the sprawling property, lush pastures dotted with fat cattle, fenced paddocks where horses grazed contentedly, and well-maintained outbuildings that spoke of prosperity and careful management. It was, without question, the finest ranch he'd ever approached for work. A sense of inadequacy crept over him as he rode toward the main house, an impressive two-story structure with a wide veranda wrapping around three sides. His clothes were trail-worn, his reputation tarnished by Blackwood's inevitable gossip, and his only credential was a handwritten note from a Blackfoot horse trader. The odds seemed stacked impossibly against him. Still, he'd come this far. He would at least deliver Jacob's letter. As he approached the house, activity in the yard caught his attention. A woman stood beside a magnificent black stallion, attempting to bridle the agitated animal while two ranch hands looked on with expressions that hovered between concern and amusement. The horse tossed its head, dancing sideways to avoid the bit. Without conscious thought, Ethan dismounted and approached. "Ma'am," he called out, keeping his voice low and steady, "that bit's too severe for him. He's fighting it." The woman turned, surprise evident on her face. She was perhaps 40, with auburn hair streaked with silver pulled back in a practical knot. Her face, sun-bronzed and lightly lined, bore the unmistakable marks of a life lived outdoors. "Is that so?" she replied, one eyebrow arched. "And you'd recommend what instead, Mr. Coulter?" "Ethan Coulter." He stepped closer, careful to move slowly near the nervous stallion. "For a horse with his spirit, I'd use a simple snaffle. Gentle pressure rather than force." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded to one of the hands. "Fetch the snaffle bit from the tack room, Jim." While they waited, Ethan approached the stallion, speaking softly as he extended his hand palm up. The horse's nostrils flared, taking in his scent, ears flickering forward with cautious interest. "That's it," Ethan murmured. "No one here means you harm." Gradually, the stallion calmed, allowing Ethan to stroke his gleaming neck. By the time Jim returned with the requested bit, the horse was standing quietly. The woman accepted the bridle, replaced the severe curb bit with the snaffle, then handed it to Ethan with a challenging look. "Since you're so confident in your approach, Mr. Coulter, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate." Ethan recognized the test for what it was. With steady hands, he slipped the bridle over the stallion's ears, gently working the bit into its mouth without resistance. The horse accepted it willingly, standing calm beneath his touch. "Impressive," the woman acknowledged. "Not many can handle midnight so easily. He's got a reputation for being difficult." "Not difficult," Ethan corrected. "Just misunderstood. He doesn't respond well to being forced." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Few of us do." She extended her hand. "Catherine Reed, this is my ranch." Ethan wiped his palm on his jeans before shaking her hand, suddenly remembering the letter tucked inside his jacket. "Ma'am, I came to deliver this from Jacob White Cloud. He thought you might have need of my services. Catherine's eyebrows rose as she accepted the folded paper. Jacob sent you? Her expression warmed noticeably. That changes things. Come inside while I read this. She handed the stallion's reins to Jim with instructions to walk him cool, then led Ethan toward the house. As they climbed the porch steps, the front door burst open and a young woman emerged, her face alight with enthusiasm. Mother, Anderson says the new foal. She stopped abruptly at the sight of Ethan. Oh, I didn't realize we had company. Lily, this is Mr. Coulter. He comes with a recommendation from Jacob. Catherine turned to Ethan. My daughter, Lily Reed. Ethan removed his hat. Miss Reed. Lily was perhaps 20, with her mother's auburn hair but worn loose around shoulders. Her eyes, a striking green, regarded him with open curiosity. Mr. Coulter just demonstrated quite a touch with Midnight, Catherine explained, ushering them both inside. Truly. Lily's expression brightened. No one's been able to handle him properly since Father died. He was the only one Midnight trusted. The interior of the house matched its impressive exterior, tastefully furnished with a blend of practical ranch items and finer pieces that must have come from back east. Catherine led them to a study off the main hall, gesturing for Ethan to sit while she read Jacob's letter. Her face revealed nothing as her eyes scanned the page, though she frowned slightly at one point before folding the paper and fixing Ethan with a penetrating gaze. Jacob speaks very highly of your abilities with horses, she said. He also mentions that you recently left Redemption Valley Ranch under complicated circumstances. Ethan straightened in his chair. Yes, ma'am. I figured he would. He suggested I ask you directly about what happened. Lily shifted in her seat, clearly intrigued by the unfolding interview. Ethan took a deep breath. I disobeyed a direct order from Vernon Blackwood to put down an injured mare. Instead, I took her with me when I left. Bought her with my wages, though Blackwood claims it wasn't enough. I see. Catherine's expression revealed nothing. And why did you save this particular horse? Because she deserved better than a bullet for a treatable injury, Ethan replied without hesitation. She's a fine breeding mare with years ahead of her. Putting her down would have been wasteful and wrong. Catherine exchanged a glance with her daughter before continuing. Mr. Blackwood has considerable influence in this valley. He could make things difficult for anyone who hires you. I'm aware of that, ma'am. And yet you came here anyway. Jacob thought you might judge me on my abilities, not Blackwood's opinion. A hint of a smile touched Catherine's lips. Jacob knows me well. She stood, decision apparently made. I need a foreman, Mr. Coulter. Someone who understands horses and can manage men. The position includes quarters, meals, and fair wages. Ethan blinked, surprised by the sudden offer. Just like that? Just like that, she confirmed. Though to be clear, this is a 1-month trial. You'll need to prove yourself to me and to the hands, some of whom have worked this ranch for decades. I understand, Ethan said, standing. Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down. See that you don't. Catherine's tone was businesslike but not unkind. Lily, please show Mr. Coulter to the foreman's cabin and introduce him to Anderson. He'll need to get acquainted with the operation immediately. As they left the study, Ethan felt both relief and apprehension wash over him. He had secured a position, better than he dared hope, but the challenge ahead was substantial. He would be an outsider stepping into authority, with Vernon Blackwood's enmity hanging over him like a storm cloud. Still, it was a chance. A fresh start at a ranch where horses were valued and treated well, if Midnight's condition was any indication. For now, that would have to be enough. The foreman's cabin was a sturdy structure set apart from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept. As Lily led Ethan across the yard, curious eyes followed their progress. Men pausing in their work to study the newcomer who would be giving them orders. "Don't mind them," Lily said, noticing Ethan's awareness of the scrutiny. "They're just wondering who you are and why Mother hired you so quickly." "Can't blame them," Ethan replied. "I'd be wondering the same." The cabin, though small, was well built and clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a separate bedroom, and a covered porch that faced the mountains. Previous occupants had left the place bare of personal touches, but the furnishings were solid and comfortable. "This was Mr. Peterson's place before his accident," Lily explained, a shadow crossing her face. "He'd been with us since I was a child." Jacob mentioned he was injured during roundup. Lily nodded. "Broke his back when his horse stepped in a prairie dog hole. Doctor says he'll never walk again." She moved to open a window, letting in fresh air. "Mother's been paying his medical expenses and providing for his family. That's the kind of person she is." The information settled comfortably in Ethan's mind, confirming his initial impression of Catherine Reed as a fair and honorable employer. "Anderson should be in the main stable," Lily continued. "He's our head wrangler, been here longest, next to Mother. You'll want to meet him first." They found Anderson in the horse barn, a rail-thin man with leathery skin and hands gnarled from decades of ranch work. He looked up from brushing a sorrel mare, his pale blue eyes sharp beneath bushy white brows. "So you're Jacob's recommendation," he said by way of greeting, giving Ethan a once-over. "Heard you handled midnight without trouble." "Horse just needed the right approach," Ethan replied modestly. Anderson snorted. "Been telling Mrs. Reed that curb bit was too much for months." He set down his brush. "Jacob says you've got away with difficult cases. I try to understand what they're telling me. Horses or people? Both when I can, though horses are usually more straightforward." A glimmer of approval flickered across Anderson's weathered face. "True enough." He extended a calloused hand. "Welcome to Whispering Pines, Mr. Coulter. Mrs. Reed's judgment has always been sound. If she hired you, I expect you'll do." The endorsement, however tentative, was significant. Ethan had worked enough ranches to know that the respect of a senior hand like Anderson would make his transition to foreman considerably smoother. "Thank you. I'd appreciate your insights on the operation when you have time. Always helps to know how things have been done before suggesting any changes." Anderson nodded, seemingly satisfied with this approach. "I'll take you around after supper, introduce you to the men. Some might be prickly at first. Couple thought they should have gotten Peterson's job, but they'll come around if you prove yourself fair." With that settled, Lily led Ethan on a tour of the ranch, the extensive stables housing over 40 horses, the cattle pens, blacksmith shop, and bunkhouse. Everywhere they went, the quality of the operation was evident in well-maintained equipment, healthy livestock, and efficient systems. "Your mother runs an impressive ranch," Ethan commented as they walked back toward the main house for the evening meal. "It wasn't always this way," Lily replied. "When Father died 6 years ago, several neighboring ranchers, including Vernon Blackwood, predicted we'd fail within a year. Mother proved them wrong." Pride colored her voice. "She not only kept Whispering Pines running, but expanded it. We have the best breeding stock in 3 counties now." The mention of Blackwood reminded Ethan of the complications his presence might bring. "Has Blackwood given your mother trouble over the years?" Lily's expression darkened. "He tried to buy our land after Father died, offered far below its value. When Mother refused, he spread rumors that she couldn't manage without a husband." She glanced sideways at Ethan. "I imagine he won't be pleased to learn she's hired you." "Probably not," Ethan agreed grimly. At the main house, they found Catherine in conversation with a well-dressed man whose tailored suit and polished boots marked him as a town dweller rather than a rancher. "Ah, there you are," Catherine said, gesturing them forward. "Thomas, this is our new foreman, Ethan Coulter. Mr. Coulter, Thomas Harrington from the Cattleman's Bank in Silvertown." Harrington extended a manicured hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Mr. Coulter, interesting timing, your arrival." "How so?" Ethan asked, immediately wary of the banker's tone. "I was just informing Mrs. Reed that Vernon Blackwood has expressed interest in purchasing the northeast section of Whispering Pines, the parcel with access to Clearwater Creek." Catherine's expression remained neutral, though Ethan detected tension in her posture. "And I was just informing Mr. Harrington that Whispering Pines is not for sale, in whole or in part." "Business decisions sometimes require reconsideration, Mrs. Reed," Harrington replied smoothly. "Especially with the drought conditions predicted for summer, that creek access could become quite valuable, which is precisely why I won't sell it," Catherine said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, it's dinner time." The banker departed with practiced politeness that did little to mask his disappointment. As Catherine watched his buggy roll away, her composed facade slipped momentarily, revealing concern. "That's the third time this month Blackwood has sent someone to inquire about that land," she said, almost to herself. "The creek is your main water source?" Ethan asked. "For the north pastures, yes. Without it, nearly a third of our grazing land would be useless during dry seasons." She turned to Ethan, her gaze direct. "I should mention that your history with Blackwood may complicate matters here. He seems unusually determined lately." "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door," Ethan said. Catherine shook her head. "The trouble was already here, Mr. Coulter. Blackwood has been trying to piece together control of every water source in the valley for years. Your presence may accelerate his timeline, but it doesn't change his intentions." They entered the house where a female cook had prepared a hearty meal. Unlike most ranches where the foreman ate with the hands, Catherine insisted Ethan join them at the family table, a gesture that signaled his position in the ranch hierarchy. As they ate, Catherine outlined her expectations: dawn to dusk workdays, weekly reports on cattle and horse conditions, and full authority over the ranch hands, with decisions on major changes reserved for her approval. The arrangement was fair, and Ethan found himself increasingly impressed with her clear-headed approach to ranch management. When the meal concluded, Ethan prepared to join Anderson for the promised introductions to the crew. At the door, Catherine stopped him with a question. "That mare you saved from Blackwood, what are your plans for her?" "She's recovering at Jacob's place," Ethan replied. "Once she's healed, I'd plan to keep her. She's a fine animal with good bloodlines." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "Bring her here when she's well. We have excellent facilities for breeding stock, and I'm curious to see a horse worth risking your livelihood for." The offer surprised him. "That's generous, ma'am. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Coulter," she said with the hint of a smile. "You still have to survive your first month at Whispering Pines." Dawn broke over Whispering Pines with the first tentative rays painting the mountains gold. Ethan had been awake for an hour already, reviewing the ledgers Peterson had kept, detailed records of breeding schedules, cattle rotations, and pasture management. By the time he stepped onto the porch of his cabin, coffee in hand, the ranch was stirring to life. His first week as foreman had passed in a blur of introductions, assessments, and careful observation. Some of the hands, following Anderson's lead, had accepted him readily enough. Others maintained a wary distance, particularly Ben Sawyer and Frank Doyle, both longtime workers who'd clearly hoped for Peterson's position. Ethan drained his cup and headed for the stables. The morning routine he'd established, checking the horses before the hands assembled for assignments, gave him quiet time with the animals and set an example of diligence he expected his men to follow. Inside the main stable, he found Lily already there, brushing down midnight. The stallion stood calmly under her ministrations, a marked change from the agitated animal Ethan had first encountered. "You're up early, Miss Reed," he commented, checking the water troughs as he moved down the row of stalls. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, not looking up from her task. Thought I'd make myself useful. Something in her tone caught his attention. Is everything all right? She hesitated, then said, Mother received a letter yesterday from the bank. Ethan stopped his work. Mr. Harrington's bank? Yes, apparently there's some question about our loan terms. She finally met his eyes. Mother didn't want me to worry, but I overheard her discussing it with Anderson. Before Ethan could respond, the stable door opened and Catherine entered, her expression shifting from concern to composed authority when she spotted them. Good morning, she said briskly. I see you're both early risers. Miss Reed was just telling me about the bank, Ethan said directly, watching Catherine's reaction. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, quickly controlled. Lily shouldn't have troubled you with that. It's a minor matter. Is it? Lily challenged. Anderson said Blackwood's been buying up bank shares. Catherine sighed. This isn't the time or place for such discussions. She turned to Ethan. We have 20 head to move to the north pasture today. I'll need your best men on it. The dismissal was clear, but Ethan had never been good at backing down when something felt wrong. Mrs. Reed, if Blackwood is pressuring you through the bank, I should know. It affects ranch operations. For a moment, Catherine looked like she might refuse further discussion. Then her shoulders dropped slightly. Walk with me, Mr. Coulter. Lily, please finish with midnight and then help Rosa with breakfast. Lily opened her mouth to protest, then thought better of it. Yes, Mother. Outside, Catherine led Ethan toward the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the ranch yard, waiting until they were well out of earshot before speaking. The situation is this. The Cattlemen's Bank holds the mortgage on Whispering Pines. The terms were favorable when my husband negotiated them years ago, but there's a clause allowing for renegotiation if ownership of the bank changes substantially. And Blackwood is buying shares, Ethan finished. Yes, not enough for outright control yet, but enough to make the board nervous about opposing him. She picked up a small stone and tossed it into the creek. Harrington's letter suggests they may need to adjust our interest rate at the next payment. Ethan let out a low whistle. That's dirty business. It's business, Catherine corrected, though without conviction. Vernon Blackwood wants Whispering Pines, or at least the water rights. If he can't buy it outright, he'll try to squeeze us financially until selling becomes the only option. And hiring me didn't help matters. She turned to face him directly. Don't flatter yourself, Mr. Coulter. Blackwood's campaign against this ranch began long before you arrived, though I will admit, she added with the ghost of a smile, your presence probably irritates him considerably. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Ethan found himself admiring her resilience. What's your plan? For now, we continue operations as normal. The next payment isn't due for 3 months. By then, I hope to have negotiated alternative financing with banks in Helena. And if that fails, her expression hardened. It won't. I didn't fight to keep this ranch for 6 years just to lose it to Vernon Blackwood's schemes. When they returned to the yard, the hands had gathered for the day's assignments. Ethan quickly organized the cattle drive to the north pasture, selecting Anderson to lead it along with the most experienced men. He assigned Sawyer and Doyle to fence repair, important work, but away from the main action, a subtle reminder of the hierarchy. Coulter, Sawyer called out as the men dispersed. That north pasture's been bone dry for weeks. Cattle won't find much grazing there. Creek water's been diverted to it for the past 3 days, Ethan replied. Grass should be coming in nicely by now. Sawyer looked skeptical. Peterson always waited until May to move the herd there. Peterson didn't have to worry about drought conditions coming early this year. Ethan kept his tone neutral but firm. Any other concerns? The challenge hung in the air between them. After a moment, Sawyer shook his head and moved off, muttering something to Doyle that Ethan couldn't catch. Catherine, who had witnessed the exchange, approached as the yard cleared. "You handled that well." Sawyer tests every new authority figure. I noticed. He's knowledgeable, though. Been with the ranch long. 15 years. He's loyal in his way, just set in his methods. She glanced toward the retreating hands. "I'd like you to ride with me today to check the southern boundary. There's been talk of rustlers in the area." The invitation surprised him. Wouldn't Anderson be better company for that? He knows the land better. "Anderson is leading the cattle drive," she pointed out. "Besides, it's time you learned every inch of Whispering Pines if you're to manage it effectively." The real reason for her request became clear as they rode south later that morning. The boundary she was concerned about adjoined Blackwood's land, where his men were constructing what appeared to be a dam across a small tributary that eventually fed into Clearwater Creek. "That's not on his property," Ethan observed, noting the placement of the structure. "The boundary line is disputed," Catherine replied grimly. "His surveyors place it 50 yards north of where ours do. The matter's been in county court for months. Meanwhile, he builds his dam and diverts water from your creek." "Precisely." She surveyed the work with narrowed eyes. "This is why the north pasture has been drier than usual. With less water coming downstream, the irrigation doesn't function properly." "What does the law say?" "Water rights in Montana are complicated, Mr. Coulter. Technically, Blackwood can use water that crosses his land, but not in a way that substantially deprives downstream properties." She gestured toward the dam. "Proving that construction like that causes substantial deprivation requires expensive lawyers and expert testimony." "Resources he has and you don't," Ethan concluded. "Not indefinitely, no." She turned her horse away from the boundary. "This is what you've stepped into, Mr. Coulter. Not just a job, but a fight for the survival of Whispering Pines." As they rode back toward the ranch house, Ethan found himself wondering if Jacob had known the full extent of the situation when he'd recommended him to Catherine. Had his friend sent him into a range war that was already well underway? Perhaps more importantly, was Ethan prepared to stand with the Reeds against a man like Blackwood, who clearly had no qualms about using every means, legal and otherwise, to get what he wanted? The answer came more easily than he expected. Yes, whatever it took, he would help Catherine Reed preserve what she had built. Not just because he needed the job, but because Whispering Pines represented everything he believed a ranch should be: well-run, humane, and honorable. 2 weeks into his tenure at Whispering Pines, Ethan rode to Jacob Whitecloud's cabin to check on Sundance. The journey gave him time to reflect on his new position and the challenges it presented. Despite initial resistance from some hands, he'd begun to establish his authority through fair treatment and demonstrated competence. Even Sawyer had grudgingly acknowledged Ethan's decision about the north pasture had been correct. The cattle were thriving on the newly irrigated grass. Jacob was outside splitting firewood when Ethan arrived. The older man's movements as efficient as a man half his age. He paused, leaning on his axe as Ethan dismounted. "You look better than when I last saw you," Jacob observed. "Whispering Pines agrees with you." "It's a good place," Ethan agreed, though complicated. Jacob set aside the axe and led Ethan toward the small corral behind his cabin. "Catherine Reed's situation with Blackwood, you mean? You knew about that when you sent me there?" A smile creased Jacob's weathered face. "I knew Catherine needed a foreman who wouldn't be intimidated by Vernon Blackwood. Someone stubborn enough to stand their ground when pushed. You might have mentioned I was walking into a range war. Would you have gone if I had?" Ethan considered this as they reached the corral where Sundance grazed peacefully. The mare's leg had healed remarkably well. Only a slight thickening around the joint remained as evidence of her injury. She trotted over at the sight of Ethan, nickering softly in recognition. "She's looking good," Ethan said, running his hand along her neck. "Better than I expected." "She's strong," Jacob replied, "like someone else I know." Ethan gave him a wry look. "I haven't answered your question yet." "You don't need to. Your face when you look at that horse tells me everything." Jacob leaned against the corral fence. "So what has Blackwood done since you arrived?" Ethan explained about the dam construction and the bank situation while checking Sundance's leg. The swelling had reduced significantly, and the mare put weight on it without hesitation. "Damming the creek is a bold move," Jacob commented when Ethan finished. "Blackwood usually operates with more subtlety. Nothing subtle about buying bank shares to pressure a widow into selling her land. Perhaps he's growing impatient or desperate." Jacob's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "The rumors say he's partnering with the railroad for a new spur line. They'd need water access for the steam engines." This was new information. "You think that's why he wants Clearwater Creek so badly?" "It would explain his increased aggression. Railroad contracts mean big money and powerful allies." Ethan whistled Sundance to him, testing her response. The mare moved fluidly, the slight limp barely noticeable. "She's ready to travel. Mrs. Reed offered to let her recover at Whispering Pines." "Take her," Jacob advised. "She'll heal better with proper stables and regular exercise." They spent another hour discussing Catherine's situation, with Jacob offering insights into Blackwood's past tactics against other ranchers. The pattern was clear. Financial pressure combined with resource manipulation, all technically legal but morally bankrupt. As Ethan prepared to leave with Sundance in tow, Jacob handed him a small leather pouch. "Herbs for the mare's leg. Mix with warm water as a poultice if the swelling returns." "Thank you," Ethan said, tucking the pouch into his saddlebag. "For everything." Jacob's expression turned serious. "Be careful, my friend. Blackwood doesn't like losing, horses or land or pride. He'll see your presence at Whispering Pines as a personal affront." "I can handle Blackwood. It's not just him I'm worried about. There's something building in this valley. Too many powerful interests converging." He gripped Ethan's arm. "Watch Catherine Reed's back, and your own." The warning stayed with Ethan as he rode toward Whispering Pines, Sundance following on a lead rope. The mare moved well despite the long layoff, her spirit undimmed by her ordeal. They were within sight of the ranch when Ethan spotted riders approaching from the direction of town, 3 men moving with purpose. He recognized Vernon Blackwood's distinctive silhouette immediately, flanked by his son Lyle and another man Ethan didn't know. Instinctively, Ethan moved Rebel off the main trail, guiding Sundance into the shelter of a stand of pines. He wasn't avoiding confrontation, just choosing the timing of it. Meeting Blackwood without witnesses, especially with Sundance present, seemed unnecessarily provocative. From his concealed position, Ethan watched the trio ride through the main gates of Whispering Pines. Whatever Blackwood's purpose, it couldn't be good news for Catherine. Ethan waited until they disappeared from view, then urged Rebel into a ground-eating lope circling wide to approach the ranch from the eastern side. He left Sundance in a small paddock near the stable and hurried toward the main house where Blackwood's horses were already hitched. Anderson intercepted him in the yard. "Blackwood's inside with Mrs. Reed," the old wrangler said quietly. "Showed up demanding a meeting, brought some railroad man with him." "How long have they been in there?" 10 minutes, maybe. Miss Lily's with them." Ethan nodded, considering his options. Bursting in seemed improper, but waiting outside felt wrong too. "They're in the study," Anderson added, as if reading his thoughts. "Windows cracked open on account of the warm day. A man standing near it might hear plenty without seeming to eavesdrop." Taking the hint, Ethan moved casually toward the side of the house, positioning himself beside the partially open study window. Inside, Blackwood's voice carried clearly. Perfectly reasonable offer, Mrs. Reed. $5,000 for water rights alone is generous. The water rights are not separable from the land, Mr. Blackwood, as I've told you repeatedly. Catherine's voice was calm but firm. The railroad doesn't need your land, the unfamiliar voice interjected. Just guaranteed access to Clearwater Creek for our water towers. The proposed spur would bring prosperity to the entire valley. At the expense of my cattle operation, Catherine countered. Without that creek, the north pastures become worthless. You'll be compensated, Blackwood said, impatience edging his tone. Not adequately. Catherine's chair scraped as she presumably stood. Gentlemen, unless you have a new proposal, this meeting is over. Lyle Blackwood spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the same sneering quality Ethan remembered. Things could get difficult for you, Mrs. Reed. Banking situation, drought coming on, rustlers in the area, lots of ways a widow woman could find herself in trouble. Are you threatening me, Lyle? Catherine's voice had dropped dangerously. Stating facts, ma'am, just facts. I think you should leave now. Lily's voice surprised Ethan with its steel. Vernon's tone turned conciliatory. No threats intended, Mrs. Reed, just concerned about your welfare. These are challenging times for small operators. Whispering Pines is hardly small, Mr. Blackwood, and I've faced challenges before. Not like what's coming, Blackwood replied, ominous certainty in his words. The railroad doesn't take no for an answer. Neither do I. Footsteps moved toward the study door. Ethan quickly stepped away from the window, rounding the corner of the house just as the front door opened and the visitors emerged. Vernon Blackwood stopped short at the sight of him, recognition and hatred flashing across his face. Well, well, if it isn't the horse thief himself. Ethan met Blackwood's glare steadily, conscious of Catherine and Lily emerging from the house behind the visitors. Mr. Blackwood, he acknowledged, deliberately ignoring the insult. So this is who you replaced Peterson with, Blackwood said to Catherine, not taking his eyes off Ethan. A man who steals valuable livestock when he disagrees with his employer. I paid for that horse, Ethan replied calmly. A fraction of her worth, Blackwood scoffed. And speaking of that animal, where is she? Dead, I assume, given your misguided attempts at veterinary care. Sundance is doing just fine, Ethan said. In fact, she arrived at Whispering Pines today. Something dangerous flashed in Blackwood's eyes. That horse is still legally mine, Coulter. I never accepted your pittance as payment. Catherine stepped forward, positioning herself subtly between the men. Any business regarding Mr. Coulter's employment or his horse has nothing to do with Whispering Pines, Mr. Blackwood. Now, as I've made my position on your offer quite clear, I believe we're finished here. The railroad man, a thin fellow with spectacles and a city suit, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Reed, perhaps you should reconsider. The Montana Eastern Line is prepared to be quite generous. I'm not interested in selling my water rights at any price, Mr. Hamilton, Catherine interrupted. My ranch depends on that creek. Lyle Blackwood stepped closer to Ethan, his posture deliberately provocative. Funny how trouble follows you, Coulter. First at our place, now here. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Wonder what would happen if that valuable mare had another accident. Barbed wire's dangerous stuff. Before Ethan could respond, Lily moved to his side. Is that a threat, Lyle? Because Sheriff Davis takes a dim view of threatening livestock on other people's property. Just making conversation, Miss Reed, Lyle replied with a smirk, reminiscing about old times with a former employee. Vernon Blackwood placed a restraining hand on his son's arm. We're leaving. Mrs. Reed knows our offer stands. His gaze shifted to Ethan. As for you, Coulter, we have unfinished business. Count on it. The three men mounted their horses and rode out, dust rising behind them in the afternoon sun. Catherine waited until they were beyond the gate before turning to Ethan. I assume that was the horse that cost you your position at Redemption Valley. Yes, ma'am. Jacob helped her heal. She's in the East Paddock now if you'd like to see her. Catherine nodded. Later. First, we need to discuss what just happened. She gestured toward the house. Both of you, come inside. In the study, Catherine poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handing one each to Ethan and Lily. Blackwood isn't just after water rights anymore, she said, taking a measured sip from her own glass. The railroad wants to build a depot on the flat land by Clearwater Creek, prime grazing territory. Jacob mentioned a spur line, Ethan said, but not a depot. Mr. Hamilton revealed that part today, Lily explained. They plan a whole shipping operation for cattle from this region. Which would benefit Blackwood enormously, Catherine added, since his ranch is the largest in the valley. Everyone else would pay premiums to use the facilities. Ethan considered the implications. So it's not just about squeezing you out, it's about controlling the entire valley's cattle industry. Precisely. Catherine set her glass down. Blackwood's not just a land-hungry rancher anymore. He's positioning himself as a cattle baron with railroad connections. What's your plan? Ethan asked. Catherine's expression was resolute. For now, we continue as before. I've written to Banks and Helena about refinancing. Until then, we need to protect our water supply. She turned to Ethan. That dam they're building has to go. Legally? Preferably. The county surveyor is coming next week to verify the property line. She paused. But if the dam mysteriously failed before then, I wouldn't shed any tears. The implication hung in the air between them. Ethan chose his words carefully. That could be seen as escalation. Blackwood escalated when he threatened my foreman and his horse, Catherine replied. Besides, that dam is likely built on my property. I have every right to remove structures illegally placed there. Lily, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. It's not just the dam. 3 cattle went missing from the south pasture yesterday. Anderson found tracks leading toward Blackwood's land. You think he's rustling your cattle? Ethan asked. I think he's testing our defenses, Catherine said, seeing how we respond to small provocations before making larger moves. Ethan drained his glass, the whiskey burning a path down his throat. I'll organize night patrols along the southern boundary, rotate the men so everyone stays fresh. Good. Catherine nodded approval. And I want Sundance kept in the main stable, not the paddock. If Lyle was serious about his threats, I don't want her vulnerable. I appreciate that, Ethan said. She's healed well, but still needs watching. Catherine studied him for a moment. You risked everything for that horse, Mr. Coulter. I'm curious. Was it principle or something else? Both, I suppose, Ethan replied honestly. She didn't deserve to die for an injury that could heal, and I couldn't work for a man who'd throw away a life so carelessly. A small smile touched Catherine's lips. Then I'm doubly glad Jacob sent you to us. She stood, signaling the end of their discussion. Lily, inform Anderson about the night patrols. Mr. Coulter, I'd like to see this remarkable mare now. At the stable, Sundance greeted them with pricked ears and bright eyes. Catherine examined her with an expert's gaze, running hands along the healing leg and watching her movement. Excellent conformation, she commented. Good depth of chest, strong quarters. What's her bloodline? Blackwood imported her sire from Kentucky. Dam was local stock, but with Spanish ancestry. Catherine nodded appreciatively. She'd produce excellent foals bred to the right stallion. She glanced sideways at Ethan. Midnight, perhaps. The suggestion took him by surprise. You'd consider that? Why not? Good breeding stock is the foundation of any successful ranch. She patted Sundance's neck. Besides, It would irritate Vernon Blackwood enormously to know his prized mare's bloodline was enriching Whispering Pines. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Ethan laughed openly. "Mrs. Reed, I believe you might be just a little vindictive." Her answering smile held both warmth and steel. "Mr. Coulter, when you've spent years defending what's yours against men like Vernon Blackwood, you learn to find satisfaction where you can." The dam came down 3 nights later under cover of darkness. Ethan led a small team, Anderson, Sawyer, and 2 trusted hands named Cooper and Martinez, to the disputed boundary line. Working by moonlight, they systematically dismantled the earthen structure, allowing Clearwater Creek to resume its natural flow toward Whispering Pines. No dynamite, no tools that can be traced, Ethan had instructed beforehand. If anyone asks, the spring runoff weakened it. Nature took its course. The men worked in near silence, communicating with gestures and whispers. Even Sawyer, who had questioned Ethan's authority at every turn, followed orders without complaint. Whatever his personal feelings, the ranch hand understood the stakes. Whispering Pines' survival depended on that water. By dawn, no evidence remained of their night's work except muddy boots and satisfied expressions. As they rode back, Anderson pulled alongside Ethan. "Blackwood will know it was us," the old wrangler said quietly. "Knowing isn't proving," Ethan replied. "Besides, he built that dam on disputed land. He can hardly complain to the sheriff about someone tearing down his illegal structure." Anderson nodded slowly. "True enough. Still, he won't take this lying down." "I'm counting on it," Ethan said. "Better he focuses his anger on me than on Mrs. Reed directly." The wrangler gave him a sharp look. "You're putting yourself in the crosshairs deliberately?" "Someone has to. Might as well be the man with the least to lose." Anderson snorted. "For someone with little to lose, you've taken on quite a lot lately. New job, responsibility for a ranch, that valuable mare. Even made some friends." He nudged his horse closer. "Don't sell yourself short, Coulter. You've built more here in 3 weeks than some men manage in years." The unexpected vote of confidence warmed Ethan as they rode into the ranch yard, where Catherine waited on the porch, a steaming pot of coffee beside her. Her knowing look told Ethan she understood exactly where they'd been and what they'd done. "Successful night patrol, gentlemen?" she asked, pouring cups as they dismounted. "Very peaceful, ma'am," Ethan replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Though we did notice the creek's flowing better this morning. Must have been something blocking it upstream." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Fortunate that it cleared itself then. The men dispersed to their various duties after coffee, bone-tired but satisfied. Ethan lingered, waiting until they were alone before speaking openly. "It's done. Cleanly, with no trace left behind." Catherine nodded. "Good. The surveyor comes tomorrow. With luck, he'll confirm the boundary is where our maps show it, and any future dam will be clearly trespassing. And if the survey goes Blackwood's way, then we fight it in court." She sighed, looking suddenly weary. "Though I don't relish another legal battle. They drain resources almost as quickly as a drought." Ethan hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him. "Mrs. Reed, what happens if the bank raises your interest rates? Jacob mentioned you've been approached by banks in Helena, but nothing's certain," she finished. "I'm aware, Mr. Coulter. If the worst happens, I have options. Selling some breeding stock, perhaps a small parcel of the eastern section." Her expression hardened. "What I won't do is sell the water rights or the north pasture. Without those, Whispering Pines stops being a viable ranch." Before Ethan could respond, hoofbeats approached rapidly from the direction of town. A young rider, barely in his teens, pulled up in a cloud of dust. "Mrs. Reed," he called, waving a telegram. Mr. Peterson at the telegraph office said this was urgent. Catherine took the envelope, tipping the boy before breaking the seal. As she read, her face paled visibly. "What is it?" Ethan asked, alarmed by her expression. "The Helena Bank." She handed him the telegram. "They've declined to offer alternative financing. Apparently, they received information questioning the ranch's solvency." Ethan scanned the terse message. "Blackwood." "Who else?" She rubbed her temples. "He's blocking every avenue." "We'll find another way," Ethan assured her, though his mind raced to identify what that might be. Catherine straightened, squaring her shoulders. "Yes, we will. But first I need to speak with Lily. She should know what we're facing." Inside the house, they found Lily not alone. Sheriff Davis, a stocky man with a salt and pepper mustache and the weathered face of a former cowhand, sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee. His expression was grave. "Sheriff," Catherine acknowledged with surprise, "what brings you out so early?" Davis stood, hat in hand. "Trouble, Mrs. Reed. Had a report from one of Blackwood's men this morning. Claims he caught someone from Whispering Pines rustling cattle last night." Ethan felt his muscles tense. "That's impossible. I can account for every hand's whereabouts from sundown to sunrise." "Maybe so," the sheriff replied. "But Blackwood's got a dead hand and 3 witnesses claiming self-defense against rustlers wearing Whispering Pines brands." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice controlled despite the shock. "Who was supposedly involved?" "Witness claims it was Ben Sawyer and 2 others they couldn't identify in the dark." Ethan shook his head emphatically. "Sawyer was with me all night on the North Patrol. So were Cooper and Martinez, Anderson too. We never went near Blackwood's property." "I believe you," Davis said, surprising them, "which is why I'm here unofficial-like before serving any papers. Something doesn't add up. Blackwood's pushing mighty hard for arrests, but his story's got holes." "What kind of holes?" Lily asked. "For one, the dead man, fellow named Tucker, has powder burns that suggest he was shot at close range, not during some nighttime chase like Blackwood claims." The sheriff replaced his hat. "For another, Tucker was fired from the Silvertown Bank last month for theft. Seems mighty convenient he'd end up working for Blackwood right after." Catherine's brow furrowed. "You think Blackwood staged this? Killed his own man?" "I think Vernon Blackwood wants Whispering Pines badly enough to play some very dangerous games," Davis replied. "But proving it is another matter." Ethan clenched his fists in frustration. "So he can just make false accusations against our hands? Get them arrested on fabricated charges?" "Not if I can help it," the sheriff said firmly. "I need something solid to counter his claims. Any idea what Blackwood might really be after with this charade?" Catherine and Ethan exchanged glances. "Time," Catherine said. "He's trying to distract us while he makes another move." "The water rights," Ethan added. "Or the railroad deal." Sheriff Davis nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. I'll stall any formal proceedings as long as I can, but be careful. All of you." He looked pointedly at Ethan. "Especially you, Coulter. Word is Blackwood's got a particular dislike for you." After the sheriff departed, Catherine turned to Ethan, her expression resolute despite the mounting threats. "We need to bring all the hands in from the far pastures. Keep everyone close until we know what Blackwood's planning next." "And Sawyer?" Ethan asked. "Keep him here at the main house where he can be accounted for at all times." She paused, considering their options. This false rustling charge, the banking pressure, the dam, they're all connected to the railroad deal. Blackwood's determined to clear us out before the surveyor arrives tomorrow. "Then we'll be ready for whatever comes next," Ethan promised, though privately he wondered how they could fight on so many fronts at once. Night fell over, Whispering Pines with a tense silence. Extra hands patrolled the boundaries while Ethan, Catherine, and Lily gathered in the study with Anderson and Sawyer to discuss strategy. A map of the ranch lay spread across the desk, key areas marked with small stones as they considered vulnerable points. "The surveyor arrives at noon tomorrow," Catherine said, tracing the disputed boundary line. "If he rules in our favor, the creek access is legally ours, and Blackwood loses his leverage with the railroad." "He won't let it get that far," Anderson predicted grimly. "Man like that always has a contingency plan." "What about the rustling accusation?" Sawyer asked, his usual bravado tempered by the seriousness of the situation. "Sheriff can stall, but eventually Blackwood will push for arrests." "Without evidence, the charges won't stick," Ethan said, though uncertainty nagged at him. In his experience, men with money and influence could manufacture evidence when needed. A ranch hand burst into the room without knocking, his face flushed with exertion. "Fire," he gasped. "East pasture fence line. Looks deliberate." They rushed outside to see an orange glow on the horizon, flames already climbing high. The east pasture, where half their cattle grazed. "Get every available man," Catherine ordered. "Buckets, blankets, anything to beat it back. Anderson, organize a fire break. Sawyer, move the herd to the west field." As they scattered to their tasks, Ethan grabbed Catherine's arm. "This is a diversion," he said urgently. "Blackwood wants us focused eastward while he makes his real move from another direction." Understanding dawned in her eyes. The house and stables, or the north pasture water access. Ethan glanced toward the burning fence line. "Either way, we can't leave both undefended." "Take whoever you need," Catherine decided. "I'll handle the fire." Ethan quickly assembled a small team, Martinez, Cooper, and 2 others, leaving the rest to fight the fire. As they armed themselves, Lily approached, rifle in hand. "I'm coming too," she stated, her expression brooking no argument. "I know every inch of this ranch better than anyone except Mother." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close to Martinez." They split into 2 groups, Ethan and Cooper heading for the stables while Lily led Martinez and the others to guard the North Creek access. The night had grown unnaturally quiet beyond the distant commotion of the firefighting efforts, the moon occasionally disappearing behind scudding clouds. At the stables, Ethan found the horses restless, sensing danger. Midnight pawed nervously in his stall while Sundance whickered softly from hers. Nothing seemed immediately amiss, but instinct kept Ethan vigilant as they checked every stall, tack room, and hayloft. "Maybe we were wrong," Cooper whispered as they completed their sweep. "Could just be a regular fire." Ethan shook his head. Blackwood wouldn't waste the opportunity. The sound of breaking glass from the main house interrupted him. Exchanging quick glances with Cooper, they sprinted across the yard, weapons ready. The house stood dark and silent, but a window on the ground floor had been shattered. Approaching cautiously from different angles, they discovered a crude firebomb, a kerosene-soaked rag stuffed into a bottle that had failed to ignite properly on the wooden floor. "Amateur work," Cooper muttered. "Lucky for us." "Too amateur," Ethan replied, suddenly uneasy. Why use a firebomb that might fail when the East Pasture fire was set properly? A gunshot echoed from the direction of the North Creek, followed by several more in rapid succession. "Lily," Ethan breathed, already running. "It's a triple diversion. The fence fire to draw most hands east, the house attack to pull us here, while the real target was always the creek." They raced toward the North Pasture, Ethan's heart pounding with each stride. The sound of gunfire grew louder as they approached, punctuated by shouts and the terrified whinnies of horses. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Lily and Martinez pinned down behind rocks near the creek bank, exchanging fire with at least 6 riders trying to force their way across Whispering Pines land. By the moonlight, Ethan recognized Lyle Blackwood among them. "Cover me," Ethan told Cooper, then circled wide to approach from the attacker's flank. Using the terrain for concealment, he managed to get within 30 yards of the Blackwood men before one spotted him. Bullets kicked up dirt at his feet as he dove for cover, returning fire with measured shots meant to drive them back rather than kill. "Coulter," Lyle's voice carried over the gunfire. "Should have known you'd be here." "This is Whispering Pines land," Ethan shouted back. "Take your men and leave before someone gets killed." "Too late for that," came the cold reply. "Your rustlers already killed Tucker. Now we're just settling accounts." Another exchange of gunfire erupted as more Whispering Pines hands arrived from the east pasture, having controlled the fire enough to respond to the new threat. The Blackwood riders found themselves outflanked and gradually retreated toward the boundary line, firing as they went. In the momentary lull, Ethan hurried to where Lily crouched behind a boulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her face was smudged with dirt and her hands trembled slightly. "Martinez took a bullet in the arm, but it's just a graze." Ethan helped the wounded ranch hand to his feet. "What happened?" "They came from downstream," Lily explained. "Said they were placing survey markers on Blackwood's property. When I told them they were trespassing, they opened fire without warning." "Survey markers? The official surveyor doesn't arrive until tomorrow." Understanding dawned in Lily's eyes. "They're trying to manipulate the survey, move the boundary markers before the official assessment." A sudden commotion from the creek bed drew their attention. One of the Blackwood riders had circled back during the confusion and was hammering a post into the ground near the water's edge, exactly where the property line was disputed. "Stop him!" Lily cried, raising her rifle. Before she could fire, hoofbeats thundered from the direction of the ranch house. Catherine Reed galloped into view atop midnight, the powerful stallion covering ground with impressive speed. Behind her rode Sheriff Davis with 2 deputies. "Hold your fire," the sheriff bellowed as they approached. "Everyone stand down." The Blackwood rider abandoned the survey stake and retreated hastily across the creek. On the opposite bank, Lyle Blackwood and his remaining men watched warily as the sheriff dismounted. "What in God's name is happening here?" Davis demanded, surveying the scene with evident anger. "Defending our property," Catherine replied calmly, though her eyes blazed. "Blackwood's men set fire to our east pasture as a diversion, then attempted to place false boundary markers before tomorrow's survey." Lyle spurred his horse forward to the creek's edge. "That's a lie. We were simply securing our water rights when your people opened fire. Self-defense, just like with Tucker." Sheriff Davis raised a hand to silence both sides. "Enough. No more shooting. The county surveyor will settle this boundary dispute tomorrow as planned. Until then," he fixed Lyle with a stern gaze, "anyone caught moving markers or trespassing goes to jail. That clear?" Lyle glared but nodded reluctantly. With a gesture to his men, they turned and rode into the darkness, leaving an uneasy peace in their wake. As the sheriff organized his deputies to maintain order overnight, Catherine approached Ethan, her expression grim but determined. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You were right about the diversion." Ethan nodded. "They're desperate. The surveyor must rule in our favor for Blackwood to be this reckless." "Which makes tomorrow even more dangerous," Catherine replied, glancing toward the retreating riders. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." Dawn broke clear and crisp over Whispering Pines Ranch, the rising sun illuminating a landscape transformed by the previous night's events. Scorched earth marred the eastern fence line, spent cartridges glinted near the creek bed, and weary ranch hands moved with the slow deliberation of those who hadn't slept. Sheriff Davis and 1 deputy had remained overnight, camping near the disputed boundary to prevent further incursions. The other deputy had ridden to Silvertown with a message for the county surveyor, emphasizing the urgency of his expected visit. In the ranch house kitchen, Catherine, Lily, and Ethan gathered with Anderson over coffee and a hastily prepared breakfast. No one spoke much. exhaustion and tension making conversation difficult. The day ahead would determine everything. "Blackwood's desperate," Anderson finally said, breaking the silence. "Never seen him take such risks. Must have promised the railroad something he can't deliver without our water rights." Catherine nodded. "The railroad deal is his chance to control the entire valley's cattle business. Without it, he's just another big rancher." "And with it?" Lily asked. "With it, he becomes untouchable," Catherine replied grimly. "The bank, the sheriff, even the territorial governor would think twice before crossing a man with railroad backing." Ethan studied the steam rising from his coffee cup. "There's something we're missing. Blackwood's too calculating for this much recklessness. Setting fires, staging rustling accusations, armed confrontations. It's almost like he's trying to create chaos regardless of the outcome." Sheriff Davis entered, removing his hat as he joined them at the table. "Maybe he is," the lawman said, accepting the coffee Lily poured him. "Just spoke with my deputy. County clerk found something interesting in the record office this morning. A duplicate deed to Whispering Pines filed last week. Gives Vernon Blackwood ownership rights if certain legal encumbrances aren't satisfied." Catherine's knuckles whitened around her cup. "That's impossible. This ranch is free and clear except for the bank mortgage." "Which is the encumbrance," Ethan realized suddenly. "If the bank raises your rates and you can't pay, Blackwood steps in with his fraudulent deed," Sheriff Davis finished. "Classic land grab tactic. I've seen it before in Wyoming." "Can he get away with this?" Lily asked, alarm evident in her voice. "Not if I have anything to say about it," the sheriff replied. "But he's obviously planning something big today. The surveyor, the bank, the deed, it all converges now." The sound of approaching riders drew them outside. To their surprise, it wasn't the county surveyor, but Thomas Harrington from the Cattlemen's Bank, accompanied by Vernon Blackwood himself, and 3 riders Ethan didn't recognize. Catherine moved to the front of the group, her posture regal despite her trail-worn clothes. "Gentlemen, you're early for the survey." Harrington dismounted awkwardly, clutching a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Reed, I'm afraid this isn't about the survey. The bank has called your loan effective immediately due to covenant violations." "What violations?" Catherine demanded. "Criminal activity on the property," Blackwood interjected, remaining mounted to maintain his advantageous height. "Rustling charges against your hands, armed confrontation, destruction of property. The bank can't maintain financing under such circumstances." Sheriff Davis stepped forward. "Those charges haven't been proven, Vernon. You know that." "The loan agreement doesn't require proof, only formal accusations," Harrington said apologetically. "I'm simply following bank policy." "This is robbery dressed up as banking," Catherine said, her voice dangerously steady. Blackwood smiled thinly. "Not at all. You're welcome to refinance elsewhere, if you can find another bank willing to overlook the troubles here." The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the arrival of another party. Jacob White Cloud, accompanied by a distinguished-looking gentleman in an expensive suit. "Morning, Catherine," Jacob called, dismounting with fluid grace. "Hope we're not too late." "Late for what?" Blackwood demanded, visibly unsettled by the new arrivals. The suited gentleman stepped forward, offering Catherine a crisp business card. "Edward Hollister, First National Bank of Helena. Mr. White Cloud suggested your operation might benefit from our services." Understanding dawned on Catherine's face as she read the card. "Mr. Hollister, your timing is impeccable. It seems my current financial arrangements are being reconsidered." Blackwood's face darkened as he urged his horse closer. "This changes nothing. The Cattlemen's Bank has called the loan. Payment is due immediately." "How much?" Hollister asked calmly. $12,000, Harrington replied. "Due in full by end of business today." Hollister opened his briefcase and extracted a bank draft. "First National Bank of Helena will satisfy that obligation immediately. with a new mortgage agreement at preferential rates. He handed the draft to a stunned Harrington. "I believe this concludes your business here." Vernon Blackwood's careful composure finally cracked. "This is impossible. Helena banks don't make ranching loans in this county." "They do when the investment is sound," Hollister replied. After reviewing Mrs. Reed's operation and books, First National finds Whispering Pines to be exceptionally well managed. The breeding program alone justifies our confidence. Ethan caught Jacob's eye, receiving a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The Blackfoot horse trader had been working behind the scenes all along, using his extensive connections to secure Catherine's position. The county surveyor arrived as Harrington and his companions departed, the banker clearly relieved to extract himself from Blackwood's failing scheme. The surveyor, a meticulous man named Pruitt, spent the next several hours taking measurements and consulting maps before rendering his verdict. "The boundary line falls exactly where Mrs. Reed's deeds indicate," he announced finally, driving a marker stake into the ground beside Clearwater Creek. "This water access belongs entirely to Whispering Pines Ranch." Blackwood, who had remained throughout the survey despite his obvious fury, dismounted slowly. For a moment, Ethan thought he might physically attack the surveyor. Instead, he turned to Catherine with cold hatred. "This isn't over, Catherine, not by a long shot." "Yes, Vernon, it is," she replied evenly. "Your railroad deal is finished. Your bank manipulation has failed. And if you ever trespass on my land again, I'll have you arrested." After Blackwood and his men rode away, the ranch hands celebrated with whoops and backslapping. Catherine thanked Jacob and Hollister, who promised to finalize the refinancing details the following day in town. As the excitement settled, Ethan found himself standing alone by the corral, watching Sundance and Midnight grazing side by side in the afternoon sun. Catherine joined him, her expression thoughtful. "So," she said after a comfortable silence, "what happens now, Mr. Coulter?" "That depends," he replied honestly. "My month's trial isn't quite up. You might still decide I'm not suited to be your foreman." A smile touched her lips. "I think you've proven yourself adequately." She paused, then added, "Though I wonder if foreman is the right position for you." "Oh." He turned to face her fully. "Whispering Pines needs a partner more than an employee," she said carefully. "Someone with a stake in its future. Someone who understands that saving a horse worth saving is never a mistake, no matter the cost." Ethan felt something shift between them, possibility opening like the vast Montana sky. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Very much." Behind them, Sundance nickered softly, as if approving the arrangement that had begun with her rescue. The mare that had cost Ethan everything at Redemption Valley had, in the end, led him to Whispering Pines, and a future brighter than any he dared imagine.